We're going to have a very informal conversation, Hollie and I, this morning. I'm just going to give her a little introduction. I had to write this down too. Hollie and I discovered earlier this morning, just as a heads up, that we had some very similar mental health diagnoses. So interestingly enough, I've had to write this down too to get this right. So I am really, really happy to invite you to join me and Hollie this morning. Hollie is from Not Dead Yet Bucket List, if you don't know already. And we're going to just talk informally about how her existing mental health conditions impacted on her when Pete died on the 7th of February 2020. Not Dead Yet are continuing to raise awareness of, fundraise for, and support those with rare cancer and terminal illnesses through Pete Felton's, Hollie's husband's, journey and legacy. And Pete was a much loved 27-year-old musician from the West Midlands, which is very close to my heart. After beating addiction and cancer twice, he lost his battle to synovial sarcoma on the 7th of February 2020. He inspired so many people through his attitude to life, especially when faced with his own death. Pete was diagnosed with terminal cancer just 3 weeks after Hollie and he married. He and Hollie set up Not Dead Yet Bucket List, as I said, to raise awareness of youth and sarcoma cancers. They've been inspiring people through his journey to live the life that he'd left through ticking off his bucket list, hence the name. So although Pete has passed away, his story and inspiration are truly continuing to help and encourage others. Hollie and Pete and her families are continuing to share their journey through grief while establishing a lasting legacy for Pete. So as I say, Not Dead Yet Bucket List is raising funds to launch their own support for others like Pete with their own bucket lists and to support his nominated charities. We can talk a bit more about that in a bit later. But hello, Hollie.
Morning.
Does that feel really official now?
A little bit.
How are you feeling this morning? And
anxious, very anxious. I am pleased though to actually be here and kind of get it. It's a conversation I think it's really worth having, and there's so little kind of marry up between mental health and grief in the bereavement community and support. So I think it's definitely it's a conversation that needs to be had. So I've kind of forced myself through my anxiety to get here.
Well, it's interesting though, because I've been moderating all weekend, and although I found that a bit stressful because I've been behind the scenes, it's been fine. But I feel that this is a very difficult conversation to have if you are impacted by those mental health issues. And I am totally with you there. I hear you, I feel you, and I think we're on the same page this morning. Yeah. And I think I really can't thank you enough for, being
it's been all you guys. Like I've sent to my family yesterday, like, can't believe how supportive you have been.
Oh, thank you.
Like it's you wouldn't get that anywhere else.
Well, that's it's obviously the point of this, isn't it? Exactly. And that is the whole point of it. And we might have lost a few people, in this great scheme of things. But I hope we are helping people feel supported. So do you want to talk a bit about who you are? Tell me more about Hollie.
Yeah, so it's a difficult question in itself because with my with one of my diagnoses, borderline personality disorder, kind of my view of myself, my self-image is a bit off quite often. But basically 34 years old, grew up in Belfast, was there until I met Pete and moved to England. I'm still in England in the flat that we were in. So basically, it's not too much to tell. Went through school, went through university, had to drop out of my master's because of my mental health, and kind of always struggled with that in life. And then it kind of was like life started whenever I met Pete. things became more positive and more supportive, and I felt I kind of found myself a bit. And then so met Pete, ended up in a quite I think my family would say impulsive.
Yeah.
To me and him, it wasn't impulsive because it was just so right. It was just right. This is the logical next step. Yeah. So moved across to England, gave up my job, house and everything, moved over, and kind of had a amazing few years, got married, all that kind of hope for the future.
How long had you been together before you got married?
So we had met and got together in August of 2017, and we're married 20 months later. And then he survived 9 months after his terminal diagnosis. So he died just 100 days before our first wedding anniversary.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Gosh. And how, I suppose, I mean, of course, everybody is shocked when they lose a partner, but to lose somebody so soon that you'd only just found, and you talk about, this really, really special bond that you hadn't felt before with somebody. I can't imagine how bereft you felt when that was taken away from you.
Yeah, it was like, it's obviously it's the hardest thing I've ever went through in my life. The kind of cruelty of it, I went through so much of my life convinced, because of my mental health and depression, and I was suicidal for quite a few different stages of my life, and like I depended on self-harm to kind of get through. I never thought about the future. I didn't think I had a future. I was convinced I wasn't going to reach my 30th birthday. So like all my family and friends made a big deal of it when it did, They're like, right, you're not dead.
Not dead.
Start living your life. And it was actually when I turned 30 then that I met Pete, because he was a couple of years younger. So it was kind of like I'd finally found my place. I'd found someone, although I have like such an amazing family and friends and support network, I still always kind of felt on the peripheral of everything. I kind of felt like an outsider always looking in, just that I was kind of in the world but not really part of it. And then Pete kind of came along, and for some reason, I never doubted kind of his love for me. I never doubted his intentions, where I would have doubted every other relationship I have. I question whether that they're well-intentioned, whether they actually like me, whether they're just pretending to like me, so it was finally all kind of fell into place, and I kind of thought, right, I have a reason to live now. And then to kind of have that taken away so soon, it was beyond difficult. It was beyond difficult. It was something that I survived rather than got through, and the only reason I survived was because of my family, who were there for me, and the kind of support that I received a lot later. So
can you tell us a little bit about, for anybody that doesn't know, what borderline personality disorder, BPD, and are you okay with explaining your diagnosis?
So borderline personality disorder, mental health condition. It is a physical condition as well, in terms it is a difference in the brain, so it is a trackable mental health condition. Typically, it's very varied. There's a lot of core symptoms, but it's very varied in how it affects different people. The main kind of core symptoms would be kind of risky behavior, a lack of solid self-image, very, very impulsive, but very, the best way I've heard it described is it's like being burnt. So your emotional layers haven't kind of thickened up over time. You feel everything almost like a burn victim, so everything's heightened. So while you can be like, I would get, if I'm kind of really happy and stuff, I kind of get really giddy and hyper. If I think somebody has not said thank you, or like, you know, not looked at me or something, I think this person hates me. They obviously completely despise me. And then the kind of grief and everything is so intense.
Yes.
And then the next moment, there's nothing. Like it's like a void of feeling. So yeah, it's like everything's very black and white, and you know, kind of polar opposites within. You know, we could go through 9 different moods in a day.
And it's interesting hearing you talk. And we're sort of smiling when we're saying it, you know, especially about, like you say, the giddiness and the overexcitement. And and as you say, that is a physical symptom that you're feeling. That is not a sense of, oh, I'm going to a great party or I've got a great gig tonight. It is supercharged physical sensations of not being able to control the cortisol and adrenaline in your body. And although we're smiling and talking about that, I think it can be very difficult for people to understand that there are huge physical impacts that come from these mental, you know, sort of issues. And it can be, I don't know about you, but I sometimes find it very, very frightening, but more so the giddiness.
Yeah, I kind of feel more comfortable when I'm in the negative side of the moods, because it's kind of more familiar, more predictable. Because I kind of internalize quite a lot, and I shut myself off. Like my family and friends would tell you that I might tell them afterwards that I've been self-harming for the past 3 weeks. But at that time, like I can't communicate. Like I'm just kind of locked in. So I mean, it has been. I wouldn't say it's been 100% bad. You know, there are benefits. There are like the empathy I kind of have for people, the connection I feel with people when they're in pain. Although I can't always communicate that and kind of try to help or try to verbalize, I feel that in my core. And that it has had its kind of benefits and negativities, especially in the workplace. You know, I worked before in Belfast, I worked with adults with learning disabilities and autism, getting them into employment. And whenever something happened to one of them, I had one of my clients passed away. Whenever they were told they were losing their job, or like I was in bits. Like I would, in a team meeting where they'd say, oh, we're ending this support, oh, we're doing this, I'd end up bursting into tears saying, but that's not okay for this client. You know, what about this person or these people? And people would kind of be looking at me like she's being very dramatic. And I'm like just sitting there going, I'm not meaning to be. I'm literally just, I'm just, the tears are rolling out of me. I have no control over it because I just feel so.
And you say that word over dramatic, and I know this isn't about me, but it's about these mental issues. And I was put on the stage because I was so over dramatic as a child. You know, I said to Victoria the other day, you know, the name of my biography will be "Don't Put Your Daughter on the Stage, Mrs. Robinson. She might have BPD." So I totally hear what you're saying, and it's that visceral notion that, as you say, it's like feeling burnt. If people can imagine what it would feel like if your skin was burnt, that's the sensation you have when you're empathizing with somebody, almost, isn't it? It almost feels like you're feeling their feelings. It can be seen as over dramatizing things. And because we sometimes don't have a way, once we get into that hypersensitive state, we find it harder to communicate verbally. So it's a vicious circle in a way, isn't it?
I spend a lot of my life kind of almost waiting to react to something, because I'm very aware that if I react, maybe it'll be slightly askew. Maybe it'll be, you know, I'm reading too much into it. I'm being paranoid about what their intentions are. So it kind of makes communication a little bit kind of more difficult. And I think my main problem with most kind of mental health conditions and disabilities are, you know, it's society's view on it. If I tell somebody, oh, I have borderline personality, they automatically go, are you dangerous?
Yes.
Are
Yes.
you psychotic?
Yes. Do you have multiple personalities? Because I think people get those two confused sometimes, don't they, as well?
Yeah. There's a lot, and especially with borderline, there's a big view about kind of being so dependent on people and that fear of abandonment, which I have to the core. Like,
do you remember when that started in your life?
Not really. I kind of always struggled with my mental health. I always struggled with feeling the connection. I was kind of always, I moved quite a lot through like friendship groups. So, and it's only looking back now in the last couple of years where I've went, oh, I've had so many friends, but once I got really comfortable with them, I was convinced they were going to leave me. They were pretending to like me, that I needed to leave that situation before they abandoned me or they saw the real me. So I kind of, I have a lot of friends who I've kind of went, right, I'm in that friendship group, right, I'm going to kind of move over here. And then, you know, so it's kind of been very disjointed, and it's only looking back now where I've been able to identify and say, oh my God, I have been doing that. Like, this is why relationships have ended, or this is why friendships have maybe petered out. So it's difficult that way. And I think with society in general, if you say you have a mental health condition or you struggle with your mental health, everybody's like, oh, I understand. You know, it's you know, this is awful. You take the time you need, or you talk to me. But whenever you start showing symptoms of that,
the behaviors that are the symptoms that people are seeing as behaviors, not symptoms.
Exactly.
That's when those relationships can break down.
And it's like, no matter how many times I can say to someone, like, whenever I'm dealing with something or trying to, especially like in a work aspect, if we're like sharing a job or duty or something, like I will say, look, I do have trouble communicating, like in terms of kind of teamwork. I'm very black and white thinking, not all the time, but like I'll tend to go, right, this is either wrong or right. You know, or you're doing this or I'm doing this, you know, it needs to just be concrete, needs to be kind of spelled out. And some people find that like
a bit demanding,
maybe awkward, or maybe being a bit blunt. So it's difficult. So it's it comes with its difficulties.
Certainly does. What do you think? You talk about this kind of fear of abandonment, which I can relate to personally very, very deeply. And again, it's a physical fear of being unlovable, effectively, isn't it? And, you know, that unworthy. And that's why this festival's here, to say that we are also worthy, and hopefully for us each to hold each other and hear and see what we're saying when we are saying, I need this to be able to function well with you. But what was it that was different about Pete? What do you think? Well, how was that different? All of a sudden, you didn't feel abandoned.
I still don't understand it. You know, it's I think kind of all of my family, although it happened quite quickly. He lived in a different country. He had just found out he had cancer and had his leg amputated. He was a recovering addict, you know, so I wasn't really selling it for them. Whenever I was like, I'm going to fly over and meet this person, like I feel a real connection. And literally from that first face-to-face meeting, like we were together, that was it. You know, there was no one else for me. And although that sounds kind of very dependent and very almost obsessive, we were both in exactly the same place, and it wasn't a codependency. It was a supporting each other. It was a team.
It was very mutual.
It was very mutual. He had ADHD, and he'd obviously just had his leg amputated. He struggled with he was clean the entire time I knew him, but he had a history of addiction. He went through treatment. He went through a very bad period of his life, battling the addiction, which affected everybody around him, especially his family. So I was so lucky to then meet him at that stage after that, where he was a bit more solid. He was trying to make up for the time and the energy and the emotions he'd caused. So it was very much him at his best self. Yeah. And I really resonated with that you can choose to take all this pain and the stuff you've been through, and you don't need to be a victim. Yeah. You know, like you can make a choice, and it's not as simple as that, obviously straightforward, but when you see somebody living their life every day and not automatically being kind and not automatically thinking, what can I do to help, but making a conscious choice to say, I'm going to choose to be kind, to connect with people, to talk to people, to support other addicts who are coming in for sponsorship. You know, even with his own cancer diagnosis, being on the ward, barely, you know, struggling with his breathing, he was still the person who went downstairs and got all the elderly men their papers in the morning, because he was like, I can get down easier than them, even though he's got one leg and barely breathe. You know, he's like, that's something I can do today. You know, so it was so inspirational kind of for me, and he hated that word. He hated that word. But it was just like I saw the light in him. You know, I saw kind of his soul, and it was just, and I couldn't understand why he loved me. You know, like I really struggled with that, and I really was like, I'm gonna end up getting hurt here. Like I'm so in love with him, like he's gonna leave me, and I couldn't understand why he loved me, but I knew in my core that he really did. And that was kind of a struggle to accept that. Yeah. You know, but from the first, like with the fear of abandonment, once I kind of settled in and was like, for some reason he does love me, just go with it. You know, it was, I wasn't too worried about him leaving me, because it was kind of like, I just feel solid. I feel like this is kind of, the world has orchestrated this, because the way we met and everything was so insane. You know, how did you meet? Oh, so my sister-in-law is watching, so she'll be giggling away. So my best friend had booked on a cruise for her first wedding anniversary. But they had split up before then. So she was like, do you want to go? And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So we went on a cruise around the Baltics. Oh yeah, great. And everyone on the ship was kind of over the age of 50, over the age of 60, you know, very... Yeah, watch it. Yeah. But carry on. Yeah. I'm joking. There was a few people who, you know, really held conversation to be able to chat to, but most of them just weren't interested in talking to two under 30s, you know. Yeah. So, but we found two other young people they were younger than us on the ship on their first wedding anniversary cruise, and it was Pete's twin sister Vicky and her husband Phil, and Vicky literally came up to us in the bar and was like, "You're young, please can we drink with you?" And I was like, we were like, yeah. So we got drunk. The four of us got drunk. It's probably the last time I was drunk, to be honest. We got on really well. And then Vicky says, you know, you're really weird. And I was like, yeah. I like weird. Yes, exactly. Like, my twin brother is really weird. And I just think you would be perfect. Oh. So of course the twin brother showed me the photo, and I was like, yeah, he's nice. Yeah. I was like, he's quite beautiful and like very alternative, and but he did have a girlfriend at the time, so like nothing, you know. But whenever that kind of ended, we started talking, we started video calling, and probably within 10 days we were talking every day for hours and hours, and even just being in the presence of each other. Like if I was typing up work and writing up reports from work that day, the video would be on, and he'd be practicing guitar, and it was just like we were in the same room, and it was just so comfortable immediately. Every night he would read me Stephen King stories. And then the next night I would read him. So I got through The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, Silmarillion. Didn't quite get to the end of Lord of the Rings. But, you know, and it was just so insanely connected, you know. So I flew over 11th of August.
Written in the stars, Helen's just said.
Yeah. Yeah. 2 weeks after he had his leg amputated, I flew over and came out of the plane into the foyer of the airport, and Vicky was standing there with Pete in his wheelchair with his leg all bandaged and stump up in a dead bouquet of flowers, which was Vicky's wedding bouquet.
Oh, I love that.
And I was just like, perfect. And then he licked my face, and he was just like, yeah.
Sorry, did you say he licked your face?
Yeah. Yeah. He just licked my face and was like, yeah, you're mine now.
Oh. So you met, so this sounds, I mean, it just sounds perfect to me. And you've got this worry when you've got together and you've gone through this beautiful time together. You've got this worry that people might abandon you, but you don't think this person is going to. You do not think this man, Pete, is going
to.
And then he dies.
Yeah.
Does that feel like he abandoned you, or has he left you feeling like, see, I'd never abandoned you? How are you left?
I kind of struggle with it in terms of I don't feel any resentment towards him. I know it wasn't his choice, not that dying is ever a choice, even if it's an active decision, kind of. It's the way I kind of come to have peace with it is that he was taken, you know. It was for whatever reason, whether there's reasons for anything, I don't know. He was, the way his family kind of have said about it is like I was there for those last few years where he needed me, I needed him. It was almost like, I'm gonna cry now. It was almost like a respite. You know, and it was just so perfect that, and I mean, we weren't perfect as people, you know. We had, you know, a couple of, you know, we're both very impulsive people. So we'd be like, I'm going to just popping into town. Then he'd come home with £1,200 guitar, you know, that kind of like, what are you doing? So yes, but any arguments were like very, very brief and kind of minor. So it was just such an ideal, and everybody always said, you know, yous are so well suited, even though yous are so different. Like, it's just when you see us together, like we're so together.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like he was taken. He didn't abandon me. And now he can never abandon me. He will always be my husband. He will always be the love of my life. He will always be that person who's waiting for me.
Yeah.
I just hate the price of it.
Of course.
You know. Of
course. You said that when this happened, there was a lack of support for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Massively. There's such a, you know, it's been so well documented and talked about the lack of support in mental health at the moment. It was on BBC News yesterday as well about the increase in mental health deaths for inpatient patients because of the lack of resources, never mind the people who are in the community by themselves. So like, not to kind of say that I didn't have any support. I had amazing family. You know, my mum was on a plane within a few hours of knowing he was kind of on his last day, and stay with me. I'd such amazing support from my friends and family, but also from his friends and family who would come to me. The amount of people who came to me and said, in his last few weeks, he approached me and made me promise to look after you, to keep an eye on you. You know, it was like he just went, like he knew, even though we didn't think it was coming that soon.
Right.
He just knew, and he was putting things in place, and he'd kind of resigned himself that he was going to die, and all he could control, even from like shortly after the terminal diagnosis, all he could control was his reaction to it, how he chose to live, whether he was kind of like be in hospital, attempt try to cling on, but with little quality of life. And he was just like, I have to go. I have to make memories. I have to make memories for my family, for my wife. I have to see everything I can see and just engage with people. Like, you know, every time we went anywhere, done anything, it always had a level of engagement. You know, you'd even in for a sensory deprivation tank in Australia when we were there with his cousin Kylie. Like it took him about 2 hours to get into the tank because he was just having this really conscious kind of spiritual conversation with the girl who does it, and like that was just as important for him as doing the tank. It was just the connection and the emotion, and I think that's what's really resonated and kind of stayed around about him. I've kind of went off on a tangent.
No, it's fine. I mean, I was going to talk about sort of the lack of mental health.
Oh, yes, yeah.
No, but actually, I think, you know, what's more interesting, perhaps at the moment, is, and you guys had both started Not Dead Yet, I can't speak this morning, Not Dead Yet bucket list before he died, quite a way before, hadn't you? What spurred you both to?
Yeah, so it was just the few weeks after his terminal diagnosis. He would kind of said, right, there's a lot of people saying, I want to help. What can I do? Is there anything you want to do? Let me give you money towards it, or let me book it for you. Let me pay for it for you. So we decided it was more of it would be better to have it kind of coming from one place where we could be accountable. You know, we didn't want to be like, here, right, we'll have that money, but we'll just never tell you what we've done with it, you know. So we wanted it to be accountable and to use the kind of platform to raise awareness. Like the cancer that he had, most GPs, like synovial sarcoma itself is rare enough, but synovial sarcoma, most GPs will never see it in their lifetime. They will never see it. It's so rare, and it is so aggressive.
Right.
And the symptoms, they still don't understand how it moves. Like it started in his foot, which is why his leg was amputated.
Yeah.
And then it went to his upper body. There's no movement through the blood. You know, it's very difficult. So there's so much awareness and funding that these charities need, that we felt we could help with. So we done that. So we raised in 48 hours, 10 grand was donated, which was insane.
Yeah.
We're completely blown away. We started doing bits of his bucket list, like going to Stonehenge for the summer solstice, for the sunrise. It was amazing. And before he started chemo.
Yeah, right, okay.
So the chemo was just to kind of stave things off, to kind of try to prolong his life.
Right.
Didn't have any effect. It made him, he was hospitalized a lot of the time. He was so ill.
Yeah.
Even when he wasn't physically ill, he was completely lethargic and had no energy to do anything. So whenever the consultant said, actually, this is having no effect, she was completely supportive and the team were completely supportive. And then there's no point in continuing. You know, he wanted to go and do his bucket list, live his last life while he still had some energy. And, you know, so a lot of it came down to pain management and adapting things and trying it that way. So we continued, we documented kind of his experience with cancer, his experience with connecting with other people. Like he'd go in and play guitar on the cancer wards for the children. So he really used what he was going through to try to help. And he made me promise to continue with Not Dead Yet after. and not dead yet, obviously, but it was named because people kept saying, "Oh, that's awful, you know, you're dying." And he'd be like, "I'm not dead yet, though. You know, let me live. You know, focus on the fact I'm alive now." You know? And that's what he wanted to go forward with, but he also wanted it to be really ironic whenever people are like, "Oh, so what's not dead? So not dead yet?" Yeah, and he'd be like, "Yeah, but he's dead." You know, he was like, "This is going to be hilarious after I'm gone."
Great sense of humor, clearly.
Yeah.
Was he a funny guy?
Oh my God, yeah. He was very funny, very dark sense of humor, just like me. I think that's one of the reasons we bonded. You know, it was everything was very dark. There's no point in taking things too seriously.
Yeah.
You know, and it breaks down like the amount of people that even just when he had his leg amputated, like the amount of people in the street that would point or say, "Oh, did you get blown up? Were you a soldier?" And they'd be just, you know, "No, actually, I had cancer," and they'd just be like, "Oh," and he'd be like, "Yeah, it's awkward now, isn't it?" You know, you know. But then, like, he'd start talking to them, and the amount of people then, the conversations you had because you'd broken that ice completely. There was no going back. And whenever we were on the bucket list cruise, from New Zealand to Australia, he was very ill the entire time. He was really, really bad. And we were going. I took him down to get some air in his wheelchair. Was in the lift, and there was this kind of semi-happy drunk guy with his wife, and immediately it was, "Oh, how'd you lose your leg, mate?" He says, "Oh, cancer." "Oh, but you're okay now, aren't you?" "Well, no, I've a few months to live, but thanks for asking." And the guy was just like, "Yeah, well, you will ask the question. You're going to get the answer."
It's just honesty, isn't it? You know, and people are affronted by that honesty as if that's offensive to say I'm dying.
Yeah.
It's like we're not even given permission to be public about our own illness or death. It's so hidden, isn't it?
Yeah. And there was some comments when we started kind of like not dead yet, like, you know, that's not really appropriate. And it's like, well, it's his. It's his, you know, it's his legacy. This is about him. He's allowed to call it what he wants. You know, this is part of strike. The amount of people that if we like with t-shirts and stuff, and his mum always wears his the hoodie out walking and stuff, and the amount of people stop and go, "What is that?" You know, so it's triggering conversations, and that in itself is raising awareness and kind of having
just in case anyone doesn't know, you have a shop, don't you? And the merchandise, and I love how it's all music based because Pete's a musician, so it's like a merch shop, and it's so still like he's here and he's performing, and it's brilliant. But there's some lovely stuff in there, guys, if you want to go and have a look, either at the website or just check out the expo booth, because there's some beautiful. Me and Victoria want to buy everything on there, to be honest, especially the mugs. I really love the mugs.
The mug.
Gorgeous. But so when he was dying, and then when he died, do you think your symptoms, your mental health symptoms changed when he died? Was there a clear shift for you? That's what I think I'm hearing.
For me, yes. Although I was completely devastated, like before he died, and caring for him, I didn't want to be apart from him. You know, I wanted to make those like kind of last days the best they could be. I very much, although I'd been suicidal in my past, and you know, I was struggling with the will to self-harm, I very much was, he's only here for a finite amount of time. This has to be about like him and about our relationship and enjoying all these bits, even if it's sitting with him while he can't sleep for 3 days, and he's thrown up and he can't keep nothing down, like that, being present with him, and just sitting reading to him whenever he couldn't sleep, you know, like it was draining, like as all caring kind of is, but I wouldn't swap it. And it gave me I knew I would be fine until after his funeral. I knew there was no way that I was going to go anywhere until I'd got to speak at his funeral.
And was that when it hit you, do you think?
I think his last day, I was broken from then. Like it was quite sudden, but we were able, like, he never wanted to be in hospital when he passed. He wanted to be kind of with his family. He didn't want he'd seen so many people be in hospital for months at a time, not being able to eat or drink or do anything. And he was just, it's not what he wanted. So he was kind of lucky. He got his kind of, I still feel like it's kind of lucky in that the morning it was stayed at his sister's the night before. He was up all night in the bath and talking to people on the phone at 4 o'clock in the morning, making them promise to look after us. And he was getting quite, you could tell his mind was starting to kind of go. He wasn't really understanding. He would be talking and we would have no idea what he was talking about. His breathing started to get difficult. So we ended up phoning an ambulance in the morning and to get his breathing under control. And at that stage, we'd literally only seen the palliative consultant the day before. So we were thinking we definitely have like a month, we'll have a few weeks, we'll have a month. They're only getting this support into place now. And the ambulance crew came, they done his oxygen. I can't remember what his sats were, but they were beyond low. Like they were that like needed immediate intervention. And the ambulance guy took me outside and we were talking and he was like, is there a plan? Like, have you discussed if he wants intervention, if he wants resuscitation? And I was like, that's everything's kind of come. So this is it coming to a head. So yeah. He'd already made it very clear he didn't want resuscitated. Like, yeah, it was maybe halfway through his chemo and it was something that could be reversed and he would still have 6 months of decent life. That was different, but there was nothing to go back to in terms of his health. There was no improvement. There was physically that exhausted everything. Yeah. So
and you and him had talked through this and how this was going to happen. So you knew exactly that you were. You were making sure that his wishes were granted. Yeah.
As difficult as that is for anybody, even if you know that person's wishes and they've been saying it for 20 years or 30 years or 40 years, being the one to say, no, he doesn't want that still feels like you're the one taking the action.
Yeah.
And you feel that kind of guilt. But I knew it was the right decision. I knew it was his decision. So I didn't back away from it, but I was like, right, this is something I'm going to have to carry with me. And so he had less than 12 hours in hospital before he passed from that. So it was quick, but he was peaceful. He was able to speak to his family, speak to me, say his kind of last words, and kind of drifted off. Like, we have a beautiful photo that I'm so thankful that Ian, who carried out our wedding and carried out the funeral, was there, and he actually took like a candid photo just in case we'd want it of Pete unconscious with his mum, dad, Vicky and me all holding him. And it is beautiful. Like, it's a heartbreak and it kills me to look at it, but I am so glad because it just encompassed everything. It was just, he's loved, he's being held, he is comfortable, he's at peace. It's we got a beautiful painting done of it, very kindly by Vicky, his twin sister, her best friend's mum, done a beautiful painting of it. I'll share it later on our page. And it's prized possession.
I can imagine, yeah. Gosh. So you didn't feel that you had much support in all this after all of this?
No.
When he finally died, I guess
not professionally,
not abandoned by him, but abandoned by, and obviously not your families, but by everybody else who can give you the real professional support that you might need with these existing diagnoses. Yeah,
and it was very challenging. I was already under a psychiatry, my local psychiatry team, mental health team. I was on the waiting list for different like getting a CPN because I'd moved from Belfast a number of years before. all the waiting lists started again, you know, because you're in a new area.
Yeah, of course.
And,
sorry, CPN is a community psychiatric nurse.
yeah, which I still haven't got.
Have you not?
No.
This is how long?
This is nearly 2 years. I've been on the waiting list for the CPN since I moved over in 2017.
Were you under a crisis team when he died? Were you able to access the crisis team already?
So the crisis team and the psychiatrists weren't very helpful. They were aware that he was dying, that I'd had, you know, appointments where that was all I discussed, the fact that he was dying.
Yeah.
And he passed away, and I was just kind of left. Like, the GP, very sympathetic, but, you know, you need to speak to the mental health team and everything. Yeah. The psychiatrist who let's just say I don't think he should be in that job.
Yeah. How long has he been under this psychiatrist?
So this specific psychiatrist in that team, nearly 3 years, and I can count on my two hands the amount of appointments I've had, and 2/3 of them have been over the phone. There is a very, very big gap in his understanding of
your diagnosis, or of the combination of those with the grief and the loss as well. Yeah. A whole lot, really.
Yeah, everything very dismissive, you know, and I think it's part of the problem with BPD as well. Like 10% of people diagnosed with BPD take their own lives.
Yeah,
like that's
very high, isn't it?
Hundreds of times higher than normal population. Yeah. And I think I was reading last night, I think 75% of people with BPD have self-harmed at some stage, you know, to cope with their...
in some way or another. And I want to add to that, if people are listening, that self-harm does not necessarily mean cutting yourself, which I think a lot of people, there are so many ways we can harm ourselves and not love ourselves effectively, isn't it? Or try to feel, which I know the cutting has a lot to do with as well, doesn't it? But sorry, I just wanted to make sure that people know that these are just so wide, and you know, sorry, I've sort of lost your way there. You were talking about this psychiatrist.
Yeah, so I think there was still, because I was like, okay, I'm diagnosed with BPD. I think there was almost the suicidal, she won't go through with it. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is all of this is coping behavior.
And that's just coming from a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
Although, and apparently, I don't know whether people know this, but within the psychiatric and mental health professions, BPD is the one that nobody wants to treat.
That's the issue. Yeah. It's been really difficult actually getting support for the BPD, and I think obviously with the grief and the bereavement is a massive part of it. But I feel that if I had more support and a better understanding of my BPD, I'd be able to cope better with my grief, because I don't know what is coming from where.
I totally hear you.
Yeah.
Then I just want to, I'm not rushing you at all, but you found the new normal. I don't want to focus on this psychiatrist. About the new normal, and is it Way as well?
Way as well, widowed and young.
Who did help you, Hollie?
So after it took a long time. So after the first year, you kind of assume like, I'll be, you know, I'll not be okay next year, but after a year has passed, I'll be able to cope better. And that just didn't happen. I got to the first anniversary. I had a very serious suicide attempt, hospitalized for 2 weeks to get me medically fit. And there was a whole lot of issues there with the support I received in the hospital. Brilliant. But as soon as you're discharged, very little. But I was very, very lucky in that my sister-in-law, and this makes me emotional as well, my sister-in-law, so Pete's twin sister, and her husband, they have, she's 2 now, so she was 1 at the time.
I've seen the picture.
Wee daughter, beautiful. And they literally picked me up from the place the mental health team sent me to from the hospital, took me back to their house, and literally mothered me for 3.5 months. Somebody was there 24/7. I was never left my own. They took the medication. They just gave it to me at my different times. They fed me. They kind of encouraged me to kind of get up or get dressed. And Charlotte, their daughter, was such a good distraction to kind of play with. But she kind of when she looks kind of cheeky at you, you just see Pete.
Yeah.
Because Vicky and Peter are twins, a lot of similarities. So, it was very difficult, but like it got me those 3.5 months gave me the kind of space and the kind of support where I could just do nothing. I didn't have to keep myself alive. Somebody else was keeping me alive. And that's what we needed. And while I was there, there was the Good Grief Festival, which is another online grief festival.
Yeah.
And they had a panel discussion, and one of the people on it was one of the founders of the New Normal. And I was watching, I was kind of thinking, this sounds absolutely terrifying. In a peer-to-peer support group, virtual.
Yeah. They're online peer-to-peer, aren't
they? Yeah, because of COVID. So everything was online, and you just you can speak or you don't have to speak. And I was like, do you know what? I'm at absolute rock bottom. What is there to lose?
Yeah.
I can turn off my camera, I can log out. And part of it was as well the fact that this man was being so vulnerable and being so open and saying, you don't need to censor anything in here. You can say exactly how you're feeling. Doesn't matter how terrible it is. Doesn't matter how good it is. Like, this is your space. And whenever, like that first meeting, I was like, I'm not going to speak. I'm just going to listen. And I ended up by the end of the meeting pouring my heart out, crying my eyes out, proper sobbing. And everybody in that meeting gave me the space. They nodded along, they asked questions, they listened, they empathized, they shared from their experiences. And it was just so, although it was kind of like anonymous because I didn't know anybody there at the time, I built up kind of those connections with different people from that. And now I'm sharing with people who I respect and who I've shared their grief with. And it's kind of developed from there, but it is honestly the main support. It's the only main mental health thing I've ever had in my life.
The New Normal.
Yeah, that has really helped. Yeah, massive impact. So much so that I now I'm a volunteer with them.
You are.
Yeah, I work supporting the hosts. So I'm a host liaison officer. Volunteer with them. We are going to be hopefully launching a new meeting after Christmas, which will be for partner loss. So I'll be getting involved in that as well and expand the conversation. And then we also have, so Way is, if anybody's not heard of it, it's called Widowed and Young. So it's for anybody who is widowed before their 50th birthday. In the UK, there's thousands of people. And they have different types of support, but a lot of it is, again, peer-to-peer, local meetups, local chats. So I've been along to a couple of them after a few panic attacks and cancellations, and kind of, connected with people in my local community who are widows. So I think those charitable organizations that are taking up all the slack from the lack of investment and resources and staff in the mental health service.
Yeah, true lifesavers. How do you feel since working with the New Normal and now becoming a volunteer? How do you feel you're managing to hold both the grief and the symptoms and and behaviours that come with those mental health conditions?
Very much depends on the day you ask me.
Yeah.
So there's certain things where I'll say, right, I can commit to this. This is, important, or this is simple to do. I can do, and the next day it'll be the most difficult thing in the world. I struggle every day. I struggle every day to I have to make the choice every morning. It's almost like an addict, you have to make the choice every day to stay sober. I have to make the choice every day not to die.
Yeah.
I'm still in that. And, I'm not out of that zone. I am treading water, I would say, a bit better. And I have a couple of life rings around me. and that's kind of where I am at the minute. So starting to volunteer and starting to do a bit more and starting to progress the Not Dead Yet into what we want to do. It makes me feel productive. It makes me feel like I'm doing something for Pete. You know, I struggle a lot with what would he think of what I'm doing now. Would he be proud of me? Would he be saying, get up off your ass and, you know, get on with your life? And I think for the moment, my life is essentially making his legacy, representing him, being his kind of person that's still here. And if that's what keeps me going at the minute, then I'm okay with that. You know, maybe in the future I'll be able to get to a stage where I can live for myself, but it's not right now. And sometimes you have to hold on to whatever you have.
Yes, and be with where you are. I mean, pushing and rushing this, feeling this pressure, which we do feel, to return to work, to be able to function normally within our relationships, at work, in society. I mean, it's such a huge pressure, and I think we have to take the pressure off of people and allow them to take their time with these feelings, you know, whether or not they're impacted extra by, you know, previous conditions. I mean, what is the future now for Not Dead Yet?
So we have now got a board of trustees. So it is now myself and Pete's twin sister Vicky and his mum Marie. So we're making plans for the future. So at the moment we've got the merch all on sale. All profits from the merch will be going back into Not Dead Yet to set up provision for people with cancer or terminal illness for their own bucket lists. There is quite a lot of support out there that you can access if you're under 18 and that sort of thing. So there's a gap for kind of older adults or kind of 30 plus, or, you know, around that age. So we want to kind of bridge that gap a little bit. We won't be completely stringent on it, like we'll take it case by case, but we're hoping to kind of build up funds to be able to provide some of those experiences for people, but also the amount I learned from managing his bucket list, from dealing with the media, from doing the fundraisers. There's so much to it. And if you miss any part of it, and I mean, the media did kind of clasp onto Pete in the sense that he was a young, good-looking guy. He was a musician, you know, just married. So we did get kind of publicity and that sort of thing. But so many people we met on the cancer wards who had cancer since they were teenager, they were early 20s. They'd never had any opportunity to do anything, and the media weren't interested. People weren't interested because there was nothing they were getting back from it. So there's definitely a big discrepancy. So I'm hoping to be able to offer some support in helping people manage their bucket list and getting that support, you know, organizing fundraising, organizing media, you know, kind of guide, you know, free support just in kind of doing all that. And we are also donating from the merch. 15% of the profits are going to the New Normal to help them bring in a bit longer term support for what we're doing at the minute, and Young Lives versus Cancer, who were instrumental through a lot of support and treatment.
Thank you, Hollie. I'm noticing that I could talk to you all day, but clearly not allowed. So loads of people saying how amazing New Normal are, how amazing you are, obviously. Helen says he'd be so proud of you. If anyone's got any questions at all, if they wanted to put them in the chat, then I'll happily hand them over to Hollie, but I don't want to keep you for too long. I mean, like I said at the beginning, it's so important to talk about these intersections that you said that makes the grief so much more complicated for you as an individual.
Yeah, it's another facet to it. Like I don't want to say it makes it worse, you know, because everybody's grief is so individual and so dependent on so many factors. But for me, having that existing mental health condition, it shadowed everything to do with the grief. You know, it added an extra facet of difficulty and complication and emotion, and kind of also the difficulty for me communicating my feelings as well. And I've spoken to different people with BPD and with different mental health conditions. In Way, on the Facebook group, we've set up a subgroup for people who have pre-existing mental health.
Okay, that's good.
So we can, be open about, you know, discuss our medications, discuss our therapies, what works, what our feelings are. And
so Way again is just for anyone that says widowed and young.
Widowed and young.
Yeah.
So there's definitely every single person I've spoken to with a pre-existing mental health condition has said it has really impacted their grief, and it has really impacted the support that they've got, because people are saying, like, I because of the lack of support I've got through the NHS, even though I'm a massive supporter of the NHS, that the resources just aren't there. I have contacted various private counsellors and therapists, and every single one of them have said either they don't deal with BPD or they do, and I am because I have had a suicide attempt this year, I'm high risk, and they don't deal with high risk. So, you know, the reason why I need the support is the reason why I can't have it. And then the one person who agreed to do an assessment with me was £120 an hour.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So almost more shocking than I imagined, the lack of support that you've. Victoria's just asked a question, which I don't want to miss before we finish. A long question to answer, but do you think you would have got better support with mental health if the pandemic hadn't happened, or hadn't happened so close to Pete's passing? Or do you think the mental health services, along with bereavement care, have never been there?
I think it has been a massive gap all along. The mental health services have, I did used to work for a trust in Northern Ireland for 7 years, and we dealt with the medical staff, like the HR side of it. There has always been kind of a lack of being able to fill posts, being able to keep people in posts, which are difficult. You know, psychiatry is and mental health is a very difficult sector to work in. You know, and the people that I don't envy them. You know, the majority of people working in those sectors are there because they care, they want to make a difference. But the amount of pressures and workloads and
as you said, the resources are so bad; they're so overstretched. And
even just the mental health and the burnout and the suicide rates of people working in that sector.
Very high.
So I think it would be just as difficult pre-pandemic, but I think the pandemic gave, like, I'm still being given only phone appointments, even though we haven't been in lockdown for a long time. Trying to engage with somebody on the phone about the state of your psychiatry. I could be sitting here in my pajamas, hadn't been getting out of bed for 4 days, and saying, I'm fine.
I'm fine. Absolutely.
There's no accountability. There's no, you know. So I think the pandemic has made things worse. But I think it was so lacking in the first place that the gap isn't maybe as big as it should have been during the pandemic.
Yeah, it's sad that mental health in general is so reliant on charities. They are lifesavers. I totally agree, Helen.
Completely. And it's the same everywhere. Whenever I struggled with my mental health in my kind of early 20s in Northern Ireland, the support I got I think it was 6 weeks CBT from the GP, put on medication, and that was kind of left until it got serious further on. But it was again another charity that kind of picked up the support, and it's the amount of charities which are going under because of the lack of funding. They've not been able to fundraise during the whole of COVID.
Of course, because a lot of those are activities that
massive. Something like 70% of most charities fundraisers are like on the street fundraising events. You know, action. Yeah, and the amount of, there was a package set up by the government that charities could apply to kind of cover a little bit of that cost, but it's a tiny percentage of charities that got that. So even CLIC Sargent, who are now Young Lives versus Cancer, they've had to massively downscale their support. So the music program that we were funding, raising money to fund places for in Pete's name, we funded a couple of places before it had to be shut down because they could only had the money to pay their clinical staff.
Yeah.
Literally everything else, even though they were able to show this is working, here's all our statistics, this is all our thing, there was just no money.
Well, as you've proven through your story, you know, it was your interaction with the new normal and finding those guys that was the actual key in helping you actually feel held and supported.
Yeah, the peer-to-peer has just been,
and the medical clinical help.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, what a story, Hollie. Thank you.
I wish it wasn't. You know, I wish it was just nice and boring, and we're sitting here, and I was moaning at him about whatever he cooked for dinner, and you know, but
I mean, it is such a beautiful legacy that you're continuing for Pete.
Hopefully.
It's so beautiful. If you want to find out more about Pete as well, guys, please do go to the Not Dead Yet bucket list, because there's loads of info about Pete there too, and Hollie, and obviously what she's continuing to do now. Do you have a final word for anyone? Oh, Helen wants to say that, is Helen your sister?
Helen's my sister.
Your sister.
Yeah.
She wants to say that we are all so proud of Hollie. She's struggled so much and always thinking of what she can do to help others. I can see that. Pete and Daddy would be so proud. Because of course you lost your dad and your cat during this period.
Yeah, so
recent period.
In between Pete's death and his funeral, my cat was diagnosed with the same cancer that he had in the same leg, and then had to have part of her paw amputated, and then passed away because it was in her lungs. So it was like exactly the same circumstances.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then my dad, a couple of months after Pete passed away, my dad had a stroke, was recovering, had a second stroke. And then the third stroke while he was in hospital, we were told there was no coming back from it. So I was also with my dad when he passed, when he kind of took his last breaths as well. And that kind of went very differently to my grief with Pete, I think, because of the borderline, the depression as well. I only had room for one grief, so it was difficult. I do still struggle with. I don't think my dad's death has actually hit me yet. Right. I still think he's just in the house with my mom because they were in Belfast. So whenever I go over, I'm just like, he must be out on his bike. He must, you know. So it's massively different, but it's
And do you feel now that you do have the support? I mean, I can see what an amazing family you have, and that is such a beautiful thing. And I know you know the new normal, and you've now found a little bit of support. But do you feel now, and you've had to go out and find that yourself, which is not easy, and props to you for actually getting the help you needed, because nobody was going to give that to you. But do you feel now that you do have the resources that you need, in a sense, to help you move forward? Is there more?
I wouldn't say that I have the resources. I kind of feel like I have directions to the library that the resources are in.
Yeah,
it's like everything is so. There's so much out there about grief, and there's such an amazing grief community now, especially like on Instagram and online, and the local groups in that, where people are becoming more comfortable talking about it. And I think the more we talk publicly about it, the easier those conversations will be, and the more normalized, and the more we can share what works, what hasn't worked for us. We can build up those kind of support. But I think I've kind of found a good community. So I now, instead of being completely lost, because like Pete's death was the first major death I've had. All my grandparents had passed before I was born. I never had any of that to kind of go through. So now I know that I have a community. I have good people with some of them have less time than me bereaved, some have a lot more, and opinions are just as valid from both. And the support that I get from them, I have somewhere to turn. I have somewhere to ask the questions, and I know I'll get honest responses. And I think at the minute that has to be enough.
Yeah, of course.
You know, I don't know where I'll be in a few weeks, in a few months, in a few years. But I think the best thing I can do is to try to make Pete proud, try to make my dad proud. And if I can do that, then I don't think there's anything kind of more I can ask for.
Beautiful. I'm aware that we've run over. I'm sorry, that's my fault, because
No, it's okay.
Thank you so much, Hollie.
No, thank you for providing all of this. It's been an amazing weekend. I've watched quite a few of the events.
It's been great, isn't it? But this is such a key conversation, because, you know, whether you suffer from a mental health issue or not, these issues are so important, and it's all about communication, support, and kind of clarity about how we're feeling, in a sense, isn't it? And being able to share that. And we are not able to do that unless we're in a space like this, and that really feels like it needs to change to me. And you're taking such huge strides to do that, Hollie. We are so grateful for you joining us and sharing.
Thank you so much. It's providing the space and expanding the conversations. You know, it's you yourselves are making a big difference to the grief community. Yeah,
it's a really kind of mutual project, isn't it? It feels like we're all in this together, and I, for one, find that very comforting, actually. Really helpful. Thank you. Is there anything else you want to say to everyone before we leave?
No, I don't think so. Just keep talking, you know, whether you're bereaved or not, or whether you've mental health issues or not, talking's and if you can't talk to somebody close to you, talk to a stranger. You know, talking is really the kind of key thing, and identifying and asking kind of for support. If anybody does want to follow us, we're on all social media at NDY Bucket List, and the website's www.notdeadbucketlist.co.uk.
Thank you so much once again.
No, thank you so much. Thank you.
You're a wonder. I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much. Bye.